looked at the phone. It was our president of the BJP state party, Dr. Ramchandra Rao garu, calling up to saying, Varma garu, meer ekku unnaru. We want to organize a function for Dr. Ramchandra garu. So I said, sir, I am in US. We can look for dates in July. So I'm very happy that you took the initiative and that was very auspicious one. And after that, God has given us immediately following up this particular program. I think the great advantage of speaking after listening to Dr. Ramchandra is like a teacher's explanation of the notes that he has given in class. So it is, the thing becomes doubly clear. I have read the books of the book already twice, but I think listening to Dr. Ramchandra in response to Uma's questions, I think clarifies the mind much more. And I think the value of the book is therefore doubly appreciated, the clarity of what the ideas are. Dr. Ramchandra was a well-known, multi-faceted personality, a very active person. A prolific writer and has written several books before. But I think this book stands out for several reasons. I don't belittle your previous books, but I think this book takes the engagement and foreign policy to a higher level. To your eyes. As an analyst, Ramchandra garu is widely read in the country. Every week we all look forward to Ramrajya column in the Indian Express, and so do thousands of his fans. He is not just an analyst, he is also a practitioner. Through the India Foundation, he is active in very many respects. Many platforms as an active participant in international diplomatic activities, conferences, seminars. On the neighborhood, he is engaged with some diplomatic activity in the neighborhood. The Indian Ocean Area Cooperation, I think, is one of his more active areas. And also, he is also very visible in many major international conferences, and I myself have run into him in 2-3 places, but he attends far more international conferences than I do. But he is very active. So in all this, one wonders, where does he get the time to write a full-fledged, outstanding book? Being an analyst or a practitioner requires a certain set of skills. It's like a painter sitting on the beach. You ask the painter to paint what he sees, he or she sees. The painter will pick one wave or 2 waves and try to capture that in the paint. But Dr. Ramchandra garu is like a painter painting a dynamic and turbulent ocean, where you are supposed to capture not just the individual waves, but the changing tides. And I think this book has captured. So each of the chapters is a wave, and I think if you read the whole book, you see the tide changing, and there's a very good description of the tide changing of this new world as we enter into the 21st century. So to do so, I think he is not just an analyst, he is not just a practitioner, but he's got the depth of a historian, along with the foresight of a strategic expert. And I think all these qualities come together in the production of this book. And analyzing global changes with an eye to future trends is not easy. It is not an easy book to write. A remarkable aspect of this book is its comprehensive scope. It almost starts inadequate. The big trends of various people, various religions is woven into the account almost right from the beginning. The range of topics taken up are very broad ranging. We've had a description of that previous speakers, the so-called decline of Western powers. I think if you read the book, I think the treatment of the subject is a little more sophisticated than seen elsewhere. I think it is easy to write off Europe or the United States as being captured in the trend of decline. But they are such big parts that even the decline will take many decades. So I think we should not make the mistake of writing off prematurely what already exists. I think the objective trend is towards a change and a decline. I think to write them off very quickly, I think would be a mistake. And that I think that point of caution is embedded in your chapter on the United States. Similarly, the rise of China, there's no doubt it's been a spectacular rise. In many instances, the rise of China is a fact of life. And instead of either sort of succumbing to the inevitability of Chinese domination, which we should not do, or seek false hopes or false security and confidence in downplaying the China rise. I think both will be a mistake. The conflict between US and China, I think, is very well described in the book, but I think with reference to the Tusi writer's track, talks about the inevitability of conflict between a rising power and an established power. But I think Dr. Ramadhav's book also points to the fact that there is also cooperation between them, which could lead to a sort of a G2 arrangement between the United States and China. There is also a very good chapter on rising powers, India foremost among them. There are other rising powers, middle powers. And there is a chapter on the power brokers of multipolarity. I think it's a very instructive part of the book. And the sophistication of that chapter, I think, is quite an extremely good value addition to the debate in the country. Because I think our debate tends to shift one way or the other. We draw easy conclusions, but I think the complexity of the situation, I think Dr. Ramadhav Garu has captured it very well. The decline of global multilateralism, that has been spoken to, the decline of the UN, the ineffectiveness of the UN, its substitution by other powers, the rise of big companies, well, big technology companies, I think has been spoken about. And their enormity, I think, has to be grasped. It's not easy to grasp. We are a $4 trillion economy. NVIDIA's market capitalization today is $4 trillion. Our defense budget is approximately about $80 billion. The R&D budget for Amazon is $80 billion. The rise of new and emerging technologies, I think the chapter is extremely well written. The impact of AI, quantum, biotechnology, genetic engineering. I think the consequences are very, very far-reaching. And I completely agree with you, sir, about what you have said on the need for India to catch up in the technology field. And I'll come to that in a moment.
Then message చేస్తాను హాల్లో.
The impact of demographics, climate change, terrorism, changes in the international order, de-dollarization, all these are extremely well written. And I would also draw your attention to the chapter on national conservatism. We thought that it was a movement confined to certain few states, but I think it is now more widespread. This means that there are certain values that need to be worthy of being protected and should be protected in national life. This is indeed a very vast canvas. Each chapter lays out the main issues and includes comments from other scholars which deepen the analysis. In each of the chapters, the author has taken pains to analyze developments and how this will impact on India. I would say my favorite chapters are the deep analysis of multipolarity, the rise of non-state actors, driving progress in an intelligent era, the chapter on India as a regional state or a global power. These are very good chapters. As a former ambassador to Russia, I was hoping you would put a separate chapter on Russia. But I understand due to scarcity of space, while you gave us a separate chapter for US and China, Russia has been dealt with in different parts of the book, and especially in the context of multipolarity. The chapter on India is titled Lion Roars Loud and Clear. I think it's a very good title. Very, very good title. Because that I think reflects very clearly where does India stand today. 8 years after independence, 10 years, a decade after very substantial focused growth, which seems to give a sense of the shift that is taking place over the last decade, setting aside so-called romantic idealism and favor certificate. I agree with you. There's reference to Prime Minister Modi's enunciation of the 5 principles of foreign policy: Samman, Samvad, Samriddhi, Suraksha, and Sastra. Individually, every country has one or two of these combinations. A great power, only a great power will have a combination of all 5. That I think is something that we should keep in mind. I think Prime Minister Modi's contribution, not just to our nation, but also particularly to foreign policy, is to get the essence of the totality of what we want to be or want to do in foreign policy. The outlook for India is positive and optimistic, which is a conclusion I share with you. Dr. Ramadhav makes the important point all this is contingent on having a stable political system with a strong center, government at the center. And fortunately, we've had that for the last 10 years. And we should, I think, consider ourselves lucky as we will compare what is happening in our neighborhood or the political instability that is there in different parts of the world, including the Middle East, more so in Europe. And we thought it was not there in America. We are seeing it more and more in America as well. This aspect is sometimes taken for granted, but if you look around the domestic instability of countries in our neighborhood, or even in developed countries of the West, India is in a much better position. While the outlook is positive, let me mention a few trends, some of which are mentioned in the book, that pose challenges for India as we progress towards what Prime Minister calls Viksit Bharat, which is India as a developed country by 2047, this centenary of our independence. Some aspects are mentioned in the book, but I think I'm wanting to take the debate a little higher. First, as recent events have shown us, the threat from Pakistan, and I must say we must pay a tribute to our armed forces who did brilliantly well in operations in the threat from Pakistan in geopolitical terms has shown us that the burdens of partition still pose very high cost for India, even after 8 years. The partition was not only of the land and rivers, but of the integrated geopolitical space, both in the Indus and the Brahmaputra river systems. Just not water, it's just not delta, people. It is the entirety of the geopolitical space. India today is among the few large countries with the longest unsettled borders. In the debate on continental and maritime dimension, this fact is sometimes not paid due attention. Of course, we need good maritime security, but the fact is that our land frontiers still remain unsettled. We also need a military build-up for the Atmanirbharta at its core. Our no-first use policy has served us well. There are some paragraphs on that in your book. Of course, it is not set in stone, but if there is a need for its review in the future, I think that should be considered. But we should always remember that an aggressive nuclear policy has not yet paid dividends for countries which have a first-use policy, like the United States or Russia. They still struggle with how they use their conventional forces. That's the first point I want to make. The second point, how do we manage our relations with the West? The United States is clearly showing that challenges to its unipolar power will be met with more unilateralism. The challenge to American unipolarity is responded with more unilateralism. How do we go to accommodate or challenge this trend? It's not an easy question to answer. One early test will be the bilateral trade agreement with the US, which will come up soon. Similarly, how deep do we integrate our economies with the West, US, UK, and EU? In our regional integration, closer home is less developed. How do we balance our technological dependence on Western companies without sacrificing our own national capabilities? And given the large Indian diaspora, the emerging risks of growing anti-immigrant sentiment that is rising in the West, how do we deal with this issue? Also, how do we emerge from the dominance of Western concepts and thinking, even if the dominance of the West declines over a period of time? So the dominance of the West is not only in material terms, it's also in intangible terms, in conceptual terms. And how do we emerge from it? The third is the rise of China. The power gap between India and China will increase in the coming decade as India sees itself rises to become the third largest economy in the world, but way behind US and China. In the rebalancing of global economic relations, how do we manage the challenges of conflict between US and China, but also the possibility of G2 partnership? Maintaining the momentum of economic growth at 8%, not at 6.5% at where we presently are, would involve climbing the ladder of technological innovation, which in my view is the biggest impediment to India's rise as a big power. And I would recommend all of you to look at the technology chapter in Dr. Ram Madhav's book, where there is a very good description of our strengths, but also more importantly, our weaknesses, which need to be addressed. But I must say, in the last 4 years, Prime Minister has taken a lot of interest in this dimension. And the technology missions in AI and quantum, in semiconductors, in biotechnology, a lot of them have made progress. But the fact of the matter is, we seem to have started only in 2020. We didn't start in 2010, we didn't start in 2000, definitely we didn't start in the year 1990. So we are in a sense in technological case against US or China. We are a catch-up country. We may have some advantages of a catch-up country, but I think we also are a little distance away from where we want to be. Fourth, our own neighborhood. For a variety of reasons, despite our best efforts, our neighborhood policy has not yielded the desired results. I say this not as a criticism, but as a statement of fact. Partly due to the rise of Chinese and US influence at the expense of our own. Can India become a global power if we are isolated in our own region? Dr. Ram Madhav mentions in his book, that with our civilizational cousins, is a very nice phrase. The Mandela theory has not worked to our advantage. Fifth, on the balance between material and spiritual aspects. I think this is very important. What differentiates any country from a great country is the interlinkage between material and spiritual aspects of its national identity and development. As India rises, finding the right balance between power and purpose will become even more significant. India as a civilization state doesn't see power as an end in itself. Power, particularly state power, is necessary to protect and nurture our culture and civilization values, which is integral to our national values and identity. Our identity is civilizational and cultural. We require states to protect that identity. As India rises, it will be a unique rise, not copying how the West rose or how China became a big power. What is the distinct pathway? More thought needs to be given to a comprehensive view of India's strategic economy that secures India's material basis for its rise as a great power, but also endows it with specific purpose rooted in India's rich civilization ethos. Swaraj in all its aspects, material and spiritual. In dealing with these 5 questions, Dr. Ram Madhav's book provides ample food for thought, and therefore should be studied and read by specialists and general readers alike. In the past decade, India has been set on the path to its rise in the coming decade, but challenges persist. If we are determined and focused to do what is in the best interest of India, Rashtriya Hit, we will make India's rise as a great power from a possibility to an inevitability. In Shri Ram Madhav's words, for Grand India, we need both Chitti and Virat, the awakening of the inner soul of the nation. In closing, let me congratulate Dr. Ram Madhavji for his excellent contribution to the national debate and India's role in the 21st century. I would like to thank the organizers for putting this event together.